Welcome to the Law Be With You podcast show. Thank you for all of you listeners who have been supporting the podcast show and the YouTube channel as well, Christian Fandom Geek. All of your support, all of your subs, all of your likes, all of your comments are greatly appreciated by the Law Be With You podcast show. We appreciate you and we thank all of you. Now, we've got an episode coming up which is a phenomenal episode, recorded with Omar. Omar is very knowledgeable in the area of lore, canon and fandom. He is, I think really, you see, when it comes to comic books, you see him really shine, but he's also very knowledgeable when it comes to films, especially Star Wars. So our up and coming episode now is our conversation, which kind of turned into a bit of a mini debate about the direction of Star Wars, about the sequel trilogy, about especially Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren, and all them, and some really big franchise characters within the Star Wars universe. It's a fantastic episode. So get ready to enjoy an awesome episode of the Law Be With You podcast show. And remember, talent is nothing without training. Welcome to the Law Be With You podcast show. This is a Christian Fandom Geek edition of the show. And if you're not familiar with that, Anchor listeners, podcast listeners, we are now also as a show on YouTube as under Christian Fandom Geek. So it's a new bit of a new venture moving forward for us, but it's exciting as well. And so I've got Omar on the show now. Omar is somebody who is pretty much a guru when it comes to knowledge on canon, lore, and comic books. And so this is really exciting to have Omar on. We only get the best collaborators on the show. So welcome, Omar, to the Law Be With You podcast show.
Hi, Aaron. I'm happy to be here.
Very nice. Now, Omar, there would be a lot more content with you on Omar, but we've had some technical issues with the sound, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Those issues are in the archives, but but we persist and we move forward and we persevere. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat on the podcast now about Star Wars. Okay, now. Omar, is it fair to say that you're a bit of a Star Wars fan as well?
Oh, yes, definitely. Being a Star Wars fan since I was about 4.
Brilliant. I'm talking to the right man here. Star Wars fan. And we've talked about Star Wars. We've seen Star Wars films. We kind of dialogue about Star Wars films every so often, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So I know that with the geek fandom that is around Star Wars, there's so much hype around Star Wars at the moment. Yeah. But I'm gonna ask you a question, and this is a question that I'm thinking, which would be really good to know, is why do you feel that Star Wars is so iconic as a sort of genre, and how it's impacted the world, pop culture, and fandom?
Well, that's quite an interesting question. It's really down to that it actually just operates on a core level with kind of the human story. I don't know if you've ever heard of the monomyth.
Do you know what? This is the thing now. There's episodes on the podcast where I've spoken about monomyth, and
right.
So this will be interesting. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Star Wars in its entirety actually follows the beats of the monomyth. It's known that George Lucas is aware of that, and he kind of built the story around that. So it's a story that resonates across the world, and the reason why it is iconic is that it follows those formulas that everyone can actually they can actually follow. They you know what I mean, it's all there.
Yes, yeah, I hear what you're saying. So that kind of, so I guess kind of like some of the listeners, if they some of the listeners might not have listened to a couple of the episodes that I've put on the podcast already. So if you're new to the podcast, then we'll we'll break this down a little bit and deconstruct it. So the monomythic, I guess, is kind of this idea that they have all the myths across the world, that every culture has its own myth, but then Joseph Campbell, who was essentially sort of an expert on myth,
Yeah.
kind of formulated the idea that there's this thing called a monomyth, where it's a shared mythology. No matter what culture you're from, it's a shared mythology. And so from that, you get the sort of hero's journey sort of idea. So that's kind of I guess the sort of the point where Star Wars has really tapped into that sort of idea and concept, I guess.
Yeah, that's true, and that's why I think we have different opinions about the later trilogy.
Okay, all right, okay. So do you feel that the newest sequel trilogy, which obviously then you've got The Force Awakens, you've got The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, do you feel they've come away from this sort of hero's journey sort of trope that we all love and we all kind of, thought was amazing?
I do believe so, especially Last Jedi. I think it turns the monomyth on its head and tries to go where the story beats would usually go. They went another way.
Yeah, so Rian Johnson obviously was the director of the Last Jedi film, and he's a famous director, isn't he? And he's a good director, isn't he? Like, to be fair,
he's done some excellent films. If you've seen his debut, Brick, that was also playing with tropes, which was the kind of film noir, and turning that on its head in kind of a teen kind of school kind of setting.
Oh wow, okay, I haven't come across that one. Okay, it's interesting. So he's a good director, but obviously he got a lot of heat and a lot of flack for the Last Jedi film.
Yeah.
I know him and Kathleen Kennedy deliberately wanted to subvert expectations. So they, like you said, they turned the monomyth on its head, and it caused a huge controversy, didn't it, within the fandom?
It did.
What do you feel? Obviously, we're looking back on that film. The film itself took a lot of money. Like in terms of the box office, it did pretty well.
Yeah.
Although it didn't do as well as The Force Awakens. So, what do you feel in terms of, was that a good idea? How did that work out for you as a fan of Star Wars?
As a fan of Star Wars, I'm going to say that it's the best film after Return of the Jedi. No, Return of the Jedi, I mean Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back, okay. So obviously it's universally acknowledged that Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone in fandom as a Star Wars fan would disagree with that statement at all.
Yeah.
You liked the film. So what did you like about the film?
I absolutely loved the film. It because it played with expectations. It was the first time for me that after watching the original trilogy when I was a child, when I didn't know what was going to happen, I mean, I will admit that, at 5 years old, I cried thinking that Han Solo died at the end of Empire.
Oh, no, you didn't, did you?
Yeah, because I thought he was dead. Then I think a week later, I think it was on ITV at the time. The next week, they put on Return of the Jedi, and I saw that he wasn't dead. But Han was like one of my favorite characters.
Did you cheer when you saw he was alive?
Yes, I did. I really did as a kid. So
that's brilliant, by the way.
Like, if you think about it, you've got the original trilogy. You did not know how that was going to end when you watched that for the first time.
No, of course not.
The prequel trilogy, we always knew what was going to happen. We knew that it was the fall of Anakin Skywalker, and and the story was the eventual turning of him into Vader.
Let me jump in there 1 second.
Yeah.
Because I totally agree with you there. And I think in a way that did sort of hamper George Lucas, because we all knew what was coming. We all knew that Anakin was going to turn to the dark side of the Force and become Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And George didn't really try and do anything different, did he? He played it safe.
He did. Well, there's other things we could talk about there because I still, as much as Phantom Menace is what it is, I think it is in the grand scheme of the saga. It's quite redundant.
Yeah.
I personally think that episode 2 should have been where the story should have started.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
for me, when I first watched A New Hope, and I heard when Luke got the lightsaber for the first time, and he got told that his father fought in the Clone Wars. Like for years, my brain was like, "Oh my gosh, the Clone Wars must have been the most awesomest thing ever." So,
Yeah.
I think that Attack of the Clones is the worst of the Star Wars movies, and I think that they could have, where we've had TV shows and everything that has expanded that. I believe that should have been a film in the Clone Wars in itself. But
okay.
But that's a bit of a sideline. That's always been my theory anyway. But yeah. He didn't really kind of subvert anything. It played to all the beats to kind of link up everything to where A New Hope went to.
I hear what you're saying. So back to The Last Jedi then.
Yeah.
You loved the film.
Yes.
It converted expectations. We know that. They deliberately did that. It was a risky maneuver. In some ways, some fans loved it, but a lot of fans hated it. I personally did not like the film. I thought it was a beautiful film. I thought it looked good. But I wanted... Wow, okay. So for me, I wanted to see Luke Skywalker, and I wanted to see Luke like Superman.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's that thing of you didn't get what you thought you was going to get, and I do get that, but that was never promised. Especially when Disney decided that when they took over Lucasfilm and they kind of jettisoned all the canon. Basically, that to me was like, everything's to play for now. So when that happened, it was like, okay, it's an open field now. We can do what we want. When Force Awakens came out, I love Force Awakens, but it is essentially a rehash of what happened in New Hope.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it is.
And it really didn't take the bull by the horns, where it's like, okay, like we've cleared the decks. You can do whatever you want. And it really didn't do that. Where Last Jedi actually did. It was like, okay, what can we do here? You know, and it also, I believe, really does take back some of what I believe are some of the central themes of the original trilogy that kind of fell by the wayside.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I know that people hate the Canto Bight storyline.
I was going to ask you about that, actually. Yeah, I was going to ask because for me, I guess, for me as a fan, I was as a black Star Wars fan, and we're black Star Wars fans, you know, the promotional material was that Finn was going to be a Jedi, and that
was going to be implication.
Wasn't it? It was, and the posters all over Hollywood, all over all the big billboards and posters were showing Finn with a blue lightsaber, Finn as looking like he was going to be the central protagonist. And I was hyped. I was like, I like John Boyega anyway. I think he's a really good actor. And I was hyped for Finn as the main hero. And then watched The Force Awakens, and I was like, what have you done? What have you done?
I completely get that. But yeah, like one of my biggest bugbears of the prequel trilogy was the whole idea of midichlorians.
Oh gosh, the midichlorians.
And the thing is that kind of was restored in Rise of Skywalker, where it is this whole thing of lineage. And I think that's
okay. Are you talking right at the end, or right at the end of the film when?
Well, the whole idea that Rey was a Palpatine.
Yeah. Okay.
So
let me get you on that one then. So Rey is a Palpatine. Okay. Now I don't have an issue with Rey as a Palpatine. I do. I mean, okay. We'll get to we'll get to that. I don't have an issue with it in general. I wouldn't have done that myself personally, though. I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But if you, whatever you're going to do, okay, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, whoever's the director of that film, the issue is there has to be, it has to be kind of sort of continuity in the story. So from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, it needs to be seen in those films in some way where you're going with the story. And the problem for me is, what by the time we've got to The Rise of Skywalker and you find out she's a Palpatine, it's not referenced or even seeded or even hinted at in the first two films of the new sequel trilogy. It's like they've just put it in there ad hoc, and it's like they didn't know what they were doing, and they ran out of ideas.
I 100% agree. I 100%. I think that the issue really is not Last Jedi; it's Rise of Skywalker. Because that's all I wanted to say is with the Canto Bight kind of scene, it brings back the theme, very much equivalent to Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man has a full face mask. The whole point of that what Stan Lee said is that anyone could be Spider-Man. You can see yourself in Spider-Man because you don't see his color or who he is. That's what made Miles Morales.
Yeah.
And that whole idea that it didn't matter who was under there. Now, in the original Star Wars, in A New Hope, it was a farm boy who took on the Empire. It was anyone. It was a lowly guy who was in the backwater of the galaxy. Then they introduced midichlorians in the prequel trilogy, meaning that there had to be a lineage for you to be that great. Now, what the Canto Bight did, and the final scene in The Last Jedi, when you saw the little boy use force powers to sweep the floor, was to bring back that idea that anyone could actually be a hero. Then what happened after that with The Rise of Skywalker was to bring it all the way back to say, no, you can't. It's lineage.
Yeah. So they've got these two ideas of anyone could be essentially anyone could be force sensitive. Is the one idea, and then the other idea, like you say, is the kind of the link between the Palpatine, lineage and the Skywalker lineage, and that the Force, is strong in those two sort of families, essentially, or stronger in those two, and then so the Canto Bight scene brings it back to what you said. Anyone could be a Jedi, anyone could be Force sensitive, and then they've done a kind of 180 on themselves and gone back on themselves in the next movie.
That's essentially, I mean, they that was kind of the opening idea if you watch A New Hope, is that it is anyone can be. It's not just that you're Force sensitive. Anyone can be a Jedi. It's anyone can be a hero. That was the whole point. And then it wasn't, and then it was, and now it's not again.
That's interesting. That is interesting. So, but obviously, going back to, so we're jumping back to A New Hope. Luke Skywalker is, the farm boy hero. So the one narrative is that Luke Skywalker is the farm boy hero.
Yeah.
But then the other narrative in there is that he's the son of Anakin Skywalker. And we find out from the prequels that Anakin is essentially, in terms of his abilities in the Force, he's stronger than any other Jedi.
Yeah, that's bringing prophecies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it doesn't really say he's stronger than any other Sith. He just says that he's the strongest Jedi.
Well, he's supposed to. The prophecy is that he's the one who's supposed to bring balance
to the Force. Yeah. And George Lucas, I've heard him on interviews a lot. I've seen him on interviews talk about this, saying he said that the prophecy to do with Anakin played out even when Anakin became Darth Vader. The prophecy was still true.
Because if you see the end of Return of the Jedi, he brings balance. The story, even the original trilogy, is not a story of Luke. It's a story of Vader because he's still fulfilling the prophecy.
Yeah, yeah. So Canto Bite scene is problematic for, and we've said why. In the Rise of Skywalker, you've also got the problematic situation where Palpatine, who's Darth Sidious, is back in the
Yeah,
film. So does that invalidate George Lucas's um, prophecy sequel
it
trilogy
does.
of Anakin bringing balance to the
It
Force?
does. That's why I thought it was a bad idea. Yeah,
Mm.
like that invalidates the whole idea of him fulfilling the prophecy of bringing the balance. And I,
What would you have done instead if you because obviously J.J. Abrams did the first film, he did The Force Awakens, and he did the third film of the new sequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker. If you were J.J. Abrams going back into the third film, what would you have done? Because obviously Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy put him in a very awkward situation where the main villain Snoke gone
but was he the main villain?
and okay, you
The
go.
main villain, the main storyline is Kylo Ren. It's the
Okay.
story. The story. What is? How do you live up to the myth of your grandfather? And
Mm.
how do you fall short? And how do you then realize that your grandfather actually did fulfill a prophecy, and that he was good in the end, but you didn't see that? The main. I mean, the way that the end of the Last Jedi is set up is
Yeah.
for Kylo Ren to wreak havoc on the galaxy, but to fall
Mm.
or to basically from the start of it, it always was supposed to be his redemption arc. But
Yeah.
they scuppered that. That like even in his redemption in the Rise of Skywalker, it wasn't earned.
Mm. It felt rushed,
Yeah,
didn't it?
when adding Palpatine and all that on there was not needed. It would that it should have been a story of Kylo Ren.
Okay. So you'd have so yeah, I agree with you actually. I think you're right there. I think it is like you say, it is a Kylo Ren story, and
I mean, they
um,
wasted the Knights of Ren.
oh, don't even go there because the Knights of don't you honestly, you're gonna get me so angry. I don't, like how right? Don't you're gonna get me so angry about this? The first film, The Force Awakens,
Yeah,
they hyped up the Knights of Ren. They
yeah,
hyped it up. It looked good. It's like, oh, so as soon as we get to The Last Jedi, I'm thinking, okay, you know what? The Knights of Ren are going to be all over this film. They're going to be amazing in this film, and they're not in the film.
but I see. I
Like
don't see that
what?
as a problem because it was like, okay, we're in the middle here. Things are already going a bit bad. So the final film should have been Knights of Ren, like Knights of Ren with Kylo, and I mean, that should have been it. Like game over for
Yeah,
the rebellion.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just got finished.
They got turned into kind of weird security
Yeah,
guards. Really weird, and they had no personality. They had no character. They had there was nothing about them. They were just hired
yeah.
goons, like a goon squad. Um, it was what a wasted opportunity, really. And that's why. So all right, let's just back up a second. So, in terms of Star Wars, in terms of Kathleen Kennedy,
Yeah,
because of things like what we've talked about here, some of the fan base, and we've talked, and I've spoke to you before about things like Geeks and Gamers and some of the really strong Star Wars fan base
yeah,
who are very traditional, who are very much like we talked about, the sort of the mono myth, the fact they're fans of the mono myth, they're fans of Luke Skywalker, they're fans of the hero's journey. They're very against Kathleen Kennedy, and there's a lot of hostility towards Kathleen Kennedy. What do you think of that?
I think it's unfounded. I do think that there have been missteps. I do think the sequel trilogy in itself isn't as cohesive as it could be, but I do think that was
Yeah,
actually I think Rise of Skywalker was actually a response to that element of fandom, trying to bring them back to
Yeah.
the fold instead of doing something actually new.
Mm.
Where that I get that there was backlash when it came to um the Last Jedi. I do think that was
Yeah.
not. I think that was where creatively we could have actually gone into different avenues, but because of that element of the fandom, they pulled it back, and I think that really really hurt the end of the trilogy, because originally Colin Trevorrow was supposed to be the one who directed the final film,
Yes, of course he was. Yeah.
and that didn't really happen.
And that would have been that would have been a different film altogether,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
definitely would be.
Mm.
But yeah, so I think there was the element that I don't think it was planned very well, and then there was the
Yeah.
circumstances of director changing, and then I think fandom
Mm.
didn't really want to see something new. It's really odd because there was an element of a backlash when it came to The Force Awakens, where there were a part of fandom that was like, we've seen this before, we want something new.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Last Jedi came
Yeah.
out and it goes, that's too new. We want what we've seen before.
I think there might have been more forgiveness if the fandom, and I'm including myself in this. If there was some more scenes, do you know, like you look at the Mandalorian and you see the part where Luke Skywalker shows up, and this is a spoiler if you haven't watched Mandalorian. What season is it? Season 2, right? Season 2. This is a spoiler. He shows up at the end of season 2, and it's Luke Skywalker. It's proper Luke Skywalker. It's Luke Skywalker as a fully fledged Jedi with the Force as his ally, and he's immense. He's just like, he's powerful. He's tenacious. He's on another level. He's on an insane level. The Dark Troopers have nothing on him, and they are intimidating, and he just wipes the floor with them. I think if we got some of that Luke Skywalker, there would have been some forgiveness. There'd have been like, okay, you know what? We got to see this amazing, super powered, almost anointed Luke.
Okay, but the thing is, you did get that. There's two elements to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Number one, we see a Luke Skywalker that's a lot older. We see a Luke Skywalker who's very much equivalent to where Yoda was too, because Yoda was one of the most powerful Jedi. And when we meet him in Empire, he didn't want to train Luke. He was he was somewhat bitter too, just like how Luke was. Now, when you're talking about Almighty Luke, that quite possibly one of the most beautiful scenes in Star Wars history is that fight he has with Kylo Ren on the sands. I mean, okay, we find out that Qui-Gon Jinn is the one who knew how to use the Force after death. We see Luke Skywalker transfer his physical form across the galaxy.
Yeah.
Tell me that is not that was cool. And you know what I mean? I think people downplay how mental that is.
I have to agree with you. It looked good. But I suppose it wasn't really a proper fight, as in like he dodged Kylo Ren a few times, and it didn't. I don't know. It didn't seem like a proper lightsaber battle. It wasn't. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It was like
that's past his prime. Like Kylo is at his prime now. This is the older guy. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the whole point of that scene wasn't for him to beat Kylo. It was just to delay to help to protect the rebels.
Yes, of course, and I suppose it did kind of reflect back to Obi-Wan Kenobi, or I guess he was like old Ben Kenobi, was kind of called then in A New Hope.
If you do really look at it, even though it turns things on its head, as I was saying before, it honored what happened before.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument. I hoped that they would do something a bit more like what we saw in The
Yeah.
Mandalorian.
Oh, I get
Um,
it. I get it. If you
but
think of the timeline of when that is, I mean, that's directly after
yeah,
Return. That's where
yeah,
Luke is. You know what I mean?
exactly.
That is prime Luke. Yeah,
He's at
that's
his
him at
peak.
his peak.
Yeah,
Where he is
he's essentially.
in Last Jedi is way past that.
Mm, yeah, yeah. That's fair to say. Actually, he's you know the old
Yeah.
hermit thinking about like that Jedi school and Kylo Ren going wrong and kind of he's probably feeling a bit sorry for himself
Yeah,
about Kylo
that's what
Ren.
it is. I mean, imagine if you watched the Star Wars saga in order with no prior knowledge. Now, I still think that was a bit of a silly scene with Count Dooku and Yoda. But imagine seeing that, then waiting a few years and then watching the original trilogy, and then watching Empire, and then seeing Yoda then, and being like, hold on, he was like absolutely, you know what I mean, blowing the
Mm.
doors off, like doing all these spins and everything, fighting Dooku, and like
Yeah,
basically everyone
yeah.
had reverence for him in the Jedi Council, and then you see him in Dagobah.
Mm,
That's it. If you think about it
mm,
that way, if you saw it in order in that way, it's no different to
mm.
what you saw with Luke.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying there. Yeah, it's the same sort
Yeah,
of paradigm, isn't it? It's not it's kind of it's the archetype that they've
yeah,
gone with within the Star Wars narrative.
yeah. And that's why I never got when I watched it, I clocked that, and I was like, I never got why there was such a backlash, because they're playing with the tropes, but they were actually very, very honorable to it too.
Yeah, I suppose in that respect, they were playing with tropes that were already
Yeah,
within the franchise they were already there. I guess they just did it in a way that, for a lot of fans, including myself, we just didn't like
yeah,
how they did it. Um, and I think a lot of fans are struggling. And obviously, like we, you think of a very Christian ideal of forgiveness. A lot of fans are really struggling to forgive Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson, to be honest. Um, so yeah, I. So what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, and we're kind of coming towards the end of this Star Wars themed episode. What do you think? What do you think they should do now? What should Kathleen Kennedy do now, moving forward?
well, I'm really, really excited for what the lineup that they are doing on Disney Plus. I'm
Yeah.
very, very excited to see the Obi-Wan TV show, because that
Oh
I think that could
wow.
be very interesting.
Yeah, and they've got Anakin
Yeah,
back for that, haven't they? They've got Hayden Christensen back as Anakin Skywalker for that
yeah.
one.
So that'll be that. I think that's going to be interesting. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron film, because for me,
Oh
as
yeah,
a
of
as
course,
a
yeah.
as a bit of a techie, like one
Mm.
of the things that as a kid, it, for me, my two brothers, they were all about the lightsabers. For me
Oh
as a
yeah.
kid, I used to get all my toys to build myself an X-wing.
Oh
So
wow.
I was way more wanting to be Wedge than than be a Jedi.
Okay, I hear you. That's nice. I was a lightsaber guy as well. I still am a lightsaber guy, but I do. You gotta love an X-wing. You gotta love like the all the sort of amazing
Well,
ships
personally, my favorite was
and
the Y-wing, but I
oh,
thought that was
okay,
a
all
lot
right.
more cooler, but I don't think it ever got its props.
Underrated and under. Oh well, there
Yeah.
you go. Wait, brilliant. Okay, Omar, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation about Star Wars, and Lord be with you, podcast viewers. You have been treated again to an excellent conversation. That was a lot of fun. I hope you are enjoying the content on the Lord be with you podcast show. We're also on YouTube now as Christian Fandom Geek. So please show some love and get on the YouTube channel and sub the channel, like the videos, and and we will be getting Omar on again very, very soon. And Omar, thank you for being
No
on the show
problem.
again.
I'm happy to be here.
Brilliant. And we will see you very, very soon on the Law Be With You podcast show. Remember, talent is nothing without training.
Cool.